In business and in life, there is always a reason behind every move. Nothing happens without a motive. When a big country suddenly changes its tone, when they start talking about higher tariffs, when they put pressure on another nation, it's never just about numbers on paper. It's about influence, it's about control, and it's about protecting their own interests. When the United States says tariff, it's not simply a trade decision, it's a signal. A signal that they want the other side to bend, to give in, to accept the rules they did right. But the world today is not the same as it was 10 or 20 years ago. India is not a small player anymore. It is a rising force, a growing economy, and a market that cannot be ignored. And when you combine growth with independence, you will face resistance from those who are used to having the upper hand. So, this pressure, this tariff threat is not just economics. It's a test of strength, of patience, and of vision. And the real question is not whether the tariff will happen, but whether India will respond as a follower, or as a leader shaping its own path. Pressure in global trade is rarely about what's happening in the moment. It's almost never about the percentages you read in the newspapers, or the figures politicians throw around in press conferences. Those numbers are just the surface, the visible part of the iceberg. What really matters is what's underneath: intentions, long-term positioning, and the silent battle for influence that shapes the next decade, not just the next quarter. When a powerful country puts pressure on another, it's like a chess move. You don't make it to win a single piece, you make it to control the board. Think about it. A tariff sounds like a financial measure, but the real effect is psychological. It sends a message. It's saying, we can change the rules whenever we want. We can make your success more expensive. We can force you to think twice before making a move. And the thing about pressure is it's designed to shift the other side's mindset. It's not about the immediate money lost or gained. It's about changing how you behave in the future. This is why global powers use tariffs, sanctions, and trade restrictions as tools. They're not blunt weapons, they're signals. When the US threatens India with a tariff, you have to understand it's not because someone woke up one morning and thought, let's raise prices. It's a strategic play. The US sees India rising economically, politically, and strategically. And in any marketplace, when a new player gets stronger, the existing leader has two options: partner with them or push them down. Pressure is the second option. It's a way to slow the other side's momentum, to make them negotiate from a weaker position. This has been the story of global trade for centuries. When Britain was the dominant power, it set the rules. When America rose after World War I, it set the rules. Now, as new economies rise, China, India, Southeast Asia, those old rules are being challenged. And every time a rule is challenged, there is friction. Tariffs are just one form of that friction. Behind them are bigger questions. Who controls supply chains? Who owns the technology? Who sets the terms of investment? These questions will decide the balance of power for decades. If you look closely, pressure is also about testing resolve. When a tariff threat is made, the real game is to see how the other side reacts. Will they protest loudly? Will they quietly adjust their policies? Will they try to strike a deal quickly to avoid disruption? Or will they stand firm and force the other side to reconsider? In that reaction lies the answer to whether a country is playing defense or offense in the global arena. India in this moment faces that kind of test. Its economy is growing, its technology sector is expanding, and its global partnerships are multiplying. But growth attracts attention, and attention brings competition. For a long time, the global trade narrative was dominated by the US, Europe, and later China. India's rise changes the equation. And every change in the equation forces someone to recalculate their strategy. That recalculation is what leads to pressure. The thing about pressure is that it's rarely applied in a single way. It comes through multiple channels: trade policies, diplomatic messaging, media, narratives, even cultural influence. A tariff might be the headline, but behind that are negotiations on defense, technology transfers, and market access. The tariff threat is like a headline in bold letters, but the real story is in the fine print that most people don't read. And in that fine print, you will find clauses and agreements that shape the balance of power far more than a single tariff ever could. In business, when a competitor tries to pressure you, it's because they believe you are gaining an advantage that could threaten their position. They may smile in public, but behind closed doors, they are calculating how to slow you down. Nations do the same thing. They project friendship, talk about partnership, and speak of shared values, but they also keep a close watch on whether your rise could change their dominance in any sector. Pressure is their way of keeping you in check while appearing reasonable. Tariffs, especially big symbolic ones are also a way to shape public opinion. A leader might announce such a measure to show strength to their own people, to create an image of protecting domestic industries. It's political theater with real economic consequences. And if the other side reacts with anger or concessions, that becomes part of the leader's narrative at home. In this sense, pressure is not just a tool in international relations, it's also a domestic political weapon. When the world hears tariff, they see a number. But decision makers see leverage. They see an opportunity to force conversations that might not happen otherwise. They see a chance to extract concessions in unrelated areas by making trade the bargaining chip. That's why tariffs often appear in the middle of negotiations about completely different issues: defense deals, environmental commitments, or foreign policy alignment. Trade is the hook, but the fish they're trying to catch is much bigger. In a global economy, nothing exists in isolation. The tariff is connected to currency exchange policies, to shipping agreements, to technology transfer laws, to the way international courts handle disputes. This is why pressure in trade is never just about today's numbers, it's about positioning yourself for tomorrow's game. And the players who understand that are the ones who win not just one negotiation, but the future itself. In trade, the surface conversation often revolves around prices, taxes, duties, and percentages, but these are only the visible points of discussion. The deeper reality is that trade is about influence, about who gets to shape the rules everyone else follows. A tariff, a quota, or regulation might look like an economic tool, but at its core, it's a political instrument, a way to determine who sets the framework for the game. Whoever writes the rules doesn't just control the present, they shape the possibilities for the future. When two nations negotiate trade, they are not just haggling over goods and services. They are positioning themselves in a larger system of governance, influence, and power. The terms of those deals, the clauses hidden in the fine print, the standards agreed upon, all of these act as silent architects of the global economy. And the one who dictates those standards has the ability to tilt the field in their favor for years, sometimes decades. This is why the fight over trade agreements can be so fierce. It's not just about what is traded today, it's about what can be traded tomorrow, and under whose conditions. When a country like the United States pushes for certain trade rules, it's often under the banner of fairness or protecting domestic industries. But embedded in those rules are mechanisms that reinforce their leverage. Rules about intellectual property, safety standards, or environmental compliance might sound neutral, but they often align with the strengths of the country proposing them. If a nation leads in technology, it will push for strict intellectual property protections. If it dominates in agriculture, it will demand lower tariffs on farm goods. By making these part of the global rulebook, it ensures that its strengths are preserved while its weaknesses are shielded. This is why disputes like a tariff threat against India cannot be viewed in isolation. They are part of a wider struggle to decide whose template will guide the flow of global commerce. If one side can force the other to accept their terms, they effectively get to write the rules. And once rules are written, they are hard to change. History shows that the frameworks established by powerful nations can last far beyond their peak dominance. The Bretton Woods system, the World Trade Organization's rules, even shipping conventions all are examples of how early control of rulemaking set the tone for decades. India's rapid economic growth and increasing role in global trade naturally bring it into this arena of rule shaping. As it exports more goods, develops more technology, and attracts more investment, it also gains a louder voice in how the game is played. But that voice challenges existing powers, especially those who have grown used to setting the terms. For them, it's not enough to compete fairly. They want to ensure the rules remain tilted in their favor. That's where pressure tactics come in. A tariff threat is more than a financial penalty, it's a bargaining chip to secure agreement on broader conditions. Consider how negotiations often work in business. The stronger player may demand that contracts be written in a way that benefits them, and if the weaker party resists, they introduce pain points: a price increase, a delayed delivery, a withdrawn service. This forces the weaker party to decide whether short-term discomfort is worth long-term independence. Nations operate on the same principle. A tariff can be seen as a pain point, intended to push India toward accepting a broader set of trade rules, beneficial to the US. The real negotiation is not over the tariff itself, but over the larger economic framework that will emerge once the dispute is resolved. The one who writes the rules gains more than just immediate advantage, yet they gain predictability. If a country's industries know that global rules align with their strengths, they can invest confidently, innovate within a favorable environment, and expand without fear of sudden disadvantage. That stability is worth far more than winning a single tariff dispute. It's the difference between playing in a fair match and playing with a permanent home field advantage. For the country that achieves it, this is the ultimate victory in trade policy. This is why trade wars, tariff battles, and sanctions often seem disproportionate to the actual value of goods in question. The numbers may be in the billions, but the control over the rules is worth trillions in the long run. Every negotiation becomes a battlefield for influence. Every agreement, no matter how technical or obscure, is a piece of the larger puzzle of who controls the architecture of global trade. And every time a powerful nation wins one of these battles, it strengthens its position for the next. For emerging economies like India, the challenge is to not just participate in trade, but to participate in the writing of its rules. It requires building alliances, developing industries that are indispensable to the world, and refusing to accept frameworks that lock them into a subordinate role. It also requires the patience to withstand pressure tactics designed to force quick concessions. The temptation to compromise for short-term relief is strong, but the cost is often paid in diminished influence for years afterward. Pride, at its highest level, is a contest of visions. One side seeks to maintain the status quo because it benefits from it. The other seeks to change the rules because it sees a future where its role is bigger and more central. Tariff threats, like the one from the US, are simply tools in this contest, a way to push back against any shift that might undermine existing advantages. They may look like economic measures, but their true function is political and strategic, to make sure the rules continue to favor the one making the demand.